Hello, my dear friends, my lovely audience. Welcome to the East West Show. Jack Chow on East West with G&E TV. Once again, today we're talking about those issues that we worry the most, we care about the most. I would rather say we worry about the most because it is not only that we care about, it's kind of with the flip-floppy thing. We really get confused talking about the Trump care replacing Obamacare, and talking about Trump tax program, tax reform programs whatsoever. And we're still not seeing anything but the talks a lot. And especially Trump care, what it says to overturn Obamacare, that was a surprise. When the overturn is supposed to be replaced, we did not see a plan. When there is no plan, they say that let's overturn it first and then we work out on a plan later. So it's very confusing. Every time, I may say my poor part is that I have to deal with this, but my lucky part is that I have a good support from big friends such as Mr. James Lee, former presidential advisor to both Presidents George Bush 41 and 43. So, sir, welcome back to the show.
Always good to be back.
Very good, very good. I feel more comfortable asking you than asking anybody else because I really hope that from you I can get a direct answer. We're quite absolutely confused. So, with the Obamacare facing the overturn, or with the Trump care overturning Obamacare, what's happening?
Well, I mean, you're
So
not the
far.
only one. There's a lot of confusion in the U.S. and there's a lot of confusion in the Senate right now. First, it's kind of important to understand that the House of Representatives earlier this year passed its own Obamacare reform and replace proposal. That plan moved into the Senate. Now, the Senate attempted to try to hold a vote on that particular version of the plan. It did not get a chance to actually hold a vote. And then they brought forward their own proposal for repeal and replace, and that didn't get sufficient votes to even have a debate. So there is a vote actually today that Senator McConnell, the Republican Majority Leader, has brought to the floor to open debate on Obamacare reform. And the question that we don't know yet as of this morning is whether or not that bill, which only requires 50 votes to bring forth debate, whether or not it's going to be a debate about replacement and an alternative Trump care proposal, or if it's just going to be a straight repeal vote, or if it's going to be the House version. So there's a lot of uncertainty as to what actually is going to be voted on today. A lot of Republicans actually don't know what they're voting on today.
All right, okay.
And I think that adds to the uncertainty that most Americans have. The important thing to remember is that Obamacare right now, as currently constructed, does not work. It does provide more health care for people because of the expansion of Medicaid, but the exchanges pretty much across the country are failing, with the exception of states like California. Over almost 2/3 of states right now have a county or multiple counties that have no insurance offering in their exchange, or only one provider. Plus, the middle class got tremendous increases in their premiums, and they were also offered less choice and also larger deductibles. So that's really the pressure right now, is to how to address the deficiencies within Obamacare. Obviously, Democrats are split themselves. There's one part of the Democratic Party that wants to replace Obamacare with a single payer system, which means the government is the primary insurance provider. Or there are other Democrats that want to make changes to Obamacare to help alleviate or address these particular issues. On the Republican side, there are frankly multiple ideas as to how to go about Obamacare. More moderate Republicans, like Senator Susan Collins of Maine, they would like to see Obamacare fixed, as well as preserve funding for things like Planned Parenthood, because they are abortion supporters. So, and then on the House side, one of the key points that they wanted to get across in their version was, in any Obamacare reform, they wanted to defund abortion services and groups like Planned Parenthood, which has created a tremendous obstacle in the Senate. The other wrinkle in all this is that, I don't know if a lot of people know, but Senator McCain recently came down as being diagnosed with brain cancer,
brain cancer,
which reduces the Republican majority in the Senate to only 51, which makes it incredibly difficult to pass any kind of Obamacare reform or replacement.
And if something happens to Senator McCain,
well, the margin is very thin. The other wrinkle to this is that last week, Friday, the Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McConnell came out with an opinion in which she stated that certain elements within the Republican Senate proposal would not pass muster to vote in the reconciliation bills currently constructed. What that basically means for most people is that there are certain elements in the Republican proposal that can't be voted on by 50-vote majorities. They have to be voted on by 60-vote majority, which would make it all but impossible to pass in the Senate because the Republicans' thin margin. So what you have in the Senate is that things are incredibly confused.
Yeah, very much so.
No one has any answers. Even after today's vote, we probably still won't have any answer. And I think that the most likely outcome of all this is that Obamacare will continue to exist in its present form without change, and that the Congress will move on to tax reform.
All right, thank you very much for that statement. I believe that's a thorough and clear. Right? But to most average Americans, what they care about, what their way of thinking is that, number one, they're asking very simple, grassrooted question: what's wrong with Obamacare?
Well, Obamacare, you have to understand that Obamacare really isn't new insurance. Obamacare created an expansion of the federal Medicaid program, which in California we call it Medi-Cal, which provides health care for the poor. Now, what they did is they expanded the definition of the poor to include lower middle income people so that more people could apply for government insurance. The private market was changed fairly radically by the creation of Obamacare exchanges, which were supposed to create a free market system where insurers will go ahead and compete for customers. That hasn't happened. And the reason why is because most insurance companies have lost money because they're having to pay out in larger and larger costs for health care, but there are fewer and fewer healthy people that are opting into the exchanges. So the price offset is fairly dramatic. That's why in states like California, even though we're a large, prosperous state with a very large population, you've seen very large insurance carriers like Aetna, United Healthcare, and others pull out because they simply can't make any money.
And also lots of people ask, because they understand it's not a political issue, it is a basic livelihood issue.
Well, I mean, it's a highly partisan issue in terms of what the solutions are being advocated.
That's exactly.
So, and I think that the other difficulty is that there's fairly universal agreement only on a very few parts of healthcare. I think there's basic universal agreement. Everybody agrees that pre-existing conditions ought to be covered. Everyone agrees that you shouldn't lose your health insurance because you have a pre-existing condition. I think there's a general consensus that the idea of cross-border competition and allowing insurers to compete for your business helps drive pricing down. So, but beyond that, and the idea of being able to keep your doctor. Beyond that, though, there's very, very little agreement as to what healthcare reform you ought to have, and that's part of the problem.
But lots of my audiences write to me in their emails saying that they're worried about the mandate, right? And it's not they want to be mandated. They say the mandate would help build up the basket, the pool.
Well, the individual mandate is one of the features of Obamacare that a lot of Republicans objected to strongly because they don't want to be forced to have to buy insurance if they choose not to. The Democratic argument in response to that is simply put that, look, if you don't mandate it, then if people who aren't covered get injured or hurt, then we as a society or the insurance industry has to pick up the tab for your health care. So there are good arguments on both sides. My own personal belief is that I oppose a personal mandate because I basically think that you got to treat people like adults and they should go ahead and make their own decisions. But I think the larger issue that gets lost in the debate is that what a lot of people don't understand, especially when they try to compare the U.S. healthcare system with systems like in Canada or Great Britain or France and so forth, is that the U.S. system is a for-profit system. Most other socialized medicine systems around the world are not for-profit. So when you have a for-profit system, unless you actually address the profit issue, and I don't mean profit just by insurance companies, you have to look at profit being generated by hospitals, healthcare systems, doctors, drug companies, medical device manufacturers, and so forth. Everybody gets a profit in the American system. Now that's great in the sense that people working in healthcare make a comfortable living. Doctors from around the world come to the U.S. to practice because they can become wealthier than they can working in other countries. The difficulty, obviously, is that makes healthcare very expensive in America. So how you reconcile those two issues is really one of the key tests. And unfortunately, both Democrats and Republicans have failed to address the cost system problem.
Very good. My dear audience, today with my big friend, my icon friend, Honorable James Lee, former presidential advisor for both George W. Bush and H. W. Bush, 41 and 43, having here to put up the answers or shed light on the issue that I'm so confused about is really, really, really my day. Thank you very much, sir. And I haven't done yet. I have quite lots of questions to ask. Sure. I feel like, oh my God, I'm also crying. Oh, finally I got him. Okay. So let's take a very short moment now. When we come back, we'll pick up the core issue starting from there right away. See, yes, please. Hello, dear folks. Welcome back to the show. My dear fellow Americans, welcome back to the show. Talking about Obamacare versus Trumpcare, talking about Trumpcare replacing Obamacare, talking about Trumpcare that with bills or with plans that couldn't even get a House vote, the Senate House vote. So under this beautiful flag of democracy, I believe that we have the right to argue. But when it comes to terms like a healthcare to the general public, talking about everybody needs, you really want to make sure this is a political issue or not political issue, or are not political issue yet made a political issue. Right. It looks to me at the end of the day, oh, by the way, I have this pleasure today to have my friend James Lee, Honorable James Lee, to be precise, coming to the studio to shed lights on this issue. Mr. Lee had been presidential provisor for both presidencies of 41 of 42. So once again, welcome back to the show. All right, good. My confusion is government is not producing anything. They do not make even shoes, right? So they are not money making. Even though they can print money, that's a different story, out of the issue, right? We're talking about the government is not a production company, right, number one. And then when you're talking about healthcare, there's supposed to be money there. Money either has to be in the pool thrown by all of the people who are covered, the more the better, the more the bigger. Or if you have a less pool, you have to have a government budget, cut the money off from anything else and put the money in the pool. Either way, only two ways. So now, on one end, they are cutting the budget, and on the other, they're giving up the mandate. Of course, personally, I have no problem if somebody let me go without a Band-Aid. Right? I'll choose my own doctor. It is my own health I manage. I don't need you. But understanding that is the help to the pool to build up the pool money. I capitulated. I believe, okay, let's do it. So how do we, to your knowledge, how do we balance to make sure there's money to cover the billions of people?
Well, look, both Republicans and Democrats have failed in cost control. There's no doubt about it. I mean, healthcare is way too expensive in America. And the Obamacare program kind of papered over and covered up the healthcare costs because the federal government was reimbursing states for the Medicaid expansion. Well, you're seeing states like California, for example, that expanded Medicaid into Medi-Cal tremendously, being faced with larger and larger costs because the federal government portion of reimbursement is decreasing. In the first year it was 90%, and now in this upcoming year I think it's going to drop down to 80%. So as the population grew, health costs grew, revenue is shrinking. So the biggest problem and this is why a lot of insurance companies left California and other states, because they can't make any money. So the difficulty that no one has really addressed is defining what is a fair rate of return in terms of profit for everyone in the healthcare services, hospitals and so forth, and doctors. And frankly, no one's really talking about it. The Democratic proposal has no cost containment proposals. The Republican ideas do not have any cost containment ideas. So until we address that issue, then really any meaningful healthcare reform is going to be very short-lived, because the United States will go bankrupt.
Yeah, on the other hand, when we talk about short of money and the mandate is the only way to get money otherwise, why do we lift off the Band-Aid?
Well, I mean, the whole idea of the mandate was to address the cost issue by ensuring that more healthy, younger people would enroll in health care.
They stay in the plan.
And then pay for premiums because they weren't drawing on services. So if you remove that health mandate and people opt out, then there would be a shortfall again in funding. Now, the Republican proposal tries to address that by eliminating the mandate, not just for everyone to have insurance, but also eliminating the mandate on the type of coverage plan that's available. Under Obamacare, all health insurance plans have to have a minimum set of provisions in terms of coverage, birth control, for example, and so forth. Under the Republican proposal, they propose to allow insurance companies to offer different plans, including plans that don't offer things like contraception and so forth, in order to reduce the overall cost, because the cost of that plan is cheaper and people can opt out. It's bringing back, like, quote unquote, what we had prior to Obamacare, which is that if you wanted to, you could only buy a catastrophic insurance plan in which you would only be covered if something major happened.
Deadly serious, yes.
But it would be a cheaper plan. So that's one idea that Senator Ted Cruz has proposed to bring back. But again, there's no consensus. The Republicans right now can't get to 52 votes, let alone 60.
Yeah. And the other thing, automatically, without having to be pushed, points out to the fact, just now you mentioned, we are so easy to compare Canada, compare Europe with the United States, without realizing that their system is non-for-profit, not for profit. Ours is for profit.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about reforms. We're talking about change everywhere. Why can't we change it into nonprofit?
Well, the most radical idea is to make America a single-payer nation. That's what the most liberal members of the Democratic Party want. And what that would basically mean was that you would eliminate insurance companies, essentially. There would be no more private insurance. You would create a single government program like a Medicaid or Medicare for all, that the government would be the payer for all the insurance bills. Americans would be taxed to pay into the system, and then the government would pay out to cover your medical care costs. The difficulty with that program is that almost every economic model I've seen shows that the cost of that program would escalate severely, but the revenue wouldn't be enough to meet it. So you would still have a gap no matter what. And the question is, how do you fill the gap? The Democrats propose, obviously, to go ahead and raise taxes. And also, they think that you will get cost savings by eliminating things like insurance companies and taking out the profit there. But they haven't proposed things like, capping reimbursement rates for doctors or reining in drug costs. That's one of the glaring issues. For example, Obamacare is that drug manufacturers had no limit on being able to raise the cost of drugs.
After all, we're talking about either we turn the system into nonprofit, or we find out who makes a profit. Is it legit? To make it a law. Everybody within range to play by the rule, not by getting extremely out of boundary profit.
Well, that's a nice idea. It'll probably never happen, just because the medical industry in America has extremely strong lobbies that support both Democrats and Republicans.
Exactly. Without hitting that kind of area, you don't get to. I mean, it seems that we average Americans will never get to the core of the issue. I'll give you an example. Some time back, I was hired on a contract for voicing over for some kind of a film to be dubbed, right? Something like that. And the film was focusing on the pharmaceutical market versus the price. And it exposes one after another, cases by case and everything, how the medicine and medications are priced. There was one example among them. There is one pill for depression. The antidepressant or something thing, right? Very, very small pill. They even showed me the example of the pill. The cost of the production for that pill is 0.3 cents, US cents. You know how much they sell on the market?
Yeah.
$163 per.
Right.
And this is the market price. As to the doctor, to the patients, to pharmacies going out of the door, that's another story, different story, because they go different story level, different price levels. So that kind of profit, if we would manage it wisely and properly, that will probably solve the money issue.
Well,
it looks all together is a money issue.
You have to understand a couple things about the pharmaceutical industry. You don't look at the cost of manufacturing for the cost of a drug. You look at the cost of the research and development and the licensing in order to secure government approval.
In the process.
So, for example, like a cancer drug might cost the pharmaceutical company in excess of $1 billion just to get it to market. The cost of manufacturing might be fairly paltry, but they have to make that money back up for all the investment they did to bring the drug to market. One of the complaints that Republicans have always had is that the FDA makes it extremely difficult to bring drugs to market because it's a very costly process to ensure efficacy and safety. So you have this embedded cost to bring drugs to market in America. Then you have to secure that profit in the time frame that we allow because of your patent. Because after that patent expires, we allow generics to come in and compete. So that's why you see during that patent period, every named brand drug becomes very expensive.
Crazy.
Like Lipitor or Botox or whatever becomes a very expensive proposition.
You're right.
Like if you look at the opiate business right now, opiate drug abuse problem right now, there's a company called Reckitt Benckiser, British company, that manufactured a drug called Suboxone, which is the medically approved drug for treating opiate abuse or addiction problems. Reckitt Benckiser Suboxone owns 85% of that market. Okay, it is the primary drug. But their patent protection was going to expire on that drug. So what did they do? They took the pill form of that drug off the market. They introduced a film, a sublingual film version of it, applied for a new patent, so they could then charge high pricing for it.
And stretch the time span for longer.
Even though it didn't cost them $1 billion to develop it, because they already had the formula for Suboxone, they just changed the format of the drug delivery process. So that kind of action by the pharmaceutical industry to recover these costs and expand their market share is a very legitimate criticism that you talk about. But we have very uneven rules in terms of how companies are allowed to get around patent protection laws and be able to combat generics to keep their profits. Now, the issue you talk about, the antidepressant medication, for example, how do we fix that? If you were to go ahead and set the price and the government were to say, okay, you can only get this much rate of return, it would cause a lot of problems for the drug industry, because what the drug industry would then say would be, well, if we can't make money off of this drug, we're not
within this period of time,
within this time frame, we're not even going to make it. So you have the potential of drugs never coming to market.
Good.
And the biggest example of that are antibiotics. Antibiotics are incredibly important drugs that we have to fight infection.
Yes.
But drug companies don't make money off of antibiotics, so they don't invest in research and development. So in the United States, we haven't had new antibiotics brought to market in over 15, 20 years.
Yeah, you're talking about amoxicillin all the time.
Yeah, but the problem is that,
everything.
but Mother Nature has created bacteria and viruses that are more and more resistant to antibiotics, but we don't have new drugs because the pharmaceutical industry can't make money off of them. And that's part of the danger that you can see down the road.
That is well stated. That is well explained. We understand that even the manufacturer, they have to make their balance, make their book balance, right? And of course, that you have only a little time span for during the patent validity to make the money back. Other than that, you either stretch it out or you give up, something like that.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, but
let's take a short moment now. When we come back, we put that together. I may have a even bigger question to even consider. I get myself scared by considering that. So stay with us, please. Hello, my dear friends, my lovely audiences, fellow Americans. Welcome back to the show. I know you deserve to know the facts about everything behind the issue, and that's why you write to me. And by the way, thank you for writing to me. You may continue to write to me by sending it to tellmydj@edimediainc.com, and I will see it immediately. If not me, myself, my crew will handle it, and at least they will let me know what you talk about. And we'll put together your questions, and we'll get professionals. We'll get those high-level, icon, high-profile professionals to sit here, to expand, to talk to you, all right? Thank you very much. And today with me is my big friend, the big brother of this community, and thank God, Asian American. Thank God, Asian American. Honorable James Lee, former presidential advisor for two presidencies, George 41 and George 43. And after that, he went back to California, being the spokesman for California back then Governor Pete Wilson, right, for some time. Quite a high-profile professional in American politics. I seem to have to talk to, I have to bring the question to him, whatever, and to get some kind of answer, hopefully, right? Okay, now, you mentioned in the very beginning, talking about the reform, talking about comparison in between U.S. and Canada, for example. Ours is for-profit, whereas theirs is none, right? Now, anywhere talking about money, we checked about the poolside money. Because of less mandate, they're getting shrinking. Or the government fails to give the money here, the cut whatsoever, and then we're talking about where the hell is the money, right? Like that. Oh, suddenly we found out, could we shrink the appetite of the manufacturer, pharmaceutical manufacturer, right? Or even pharmacies, or the chain, or whoever is on the chain, right? Everybody is a profit. Now, may I use it, like I said, when I just now, when I thought about a term, I got myself kind of like, may we do a revolution? May we turn over the whole thing? When we say overturn Obamacare, when the word overturn is on our lips, why can't we? Why couldn't we? Why are we not able to overturn the whole thing like a revolution and make it non-profit for the whole industry?
Well, I mean, you know, you can certainly try to make it a single-payer nonprofit system. I doubt it would ever happen in America, just because there are too many people and too many companies and too many industries with a vested interest in maintaining their profit. So, I mean, it's not just, you know, I think a lot of people are focused on drug manufacturers, but you have to understand that healthcare comprehensively is a massive industry. I mean, it takes up almost a third of our national economy because it's not just drug manufacturers. It covers everything from equipment manufacturers, the people who build wheelchairs, bedpans, syringe needles. It also includes not just major hospitals like Cedars-Sinai and so forth, but community clinics, regional hospitals, right down to
even though the supply.
Yeah, right down to the nurses that work in a Walmart. It also covers the profession itself. Not just your basic practitioner doctor, but healthcare assistants, office assistants, phlebotomists, X-ray technicians, endocrinologists. I mean, the list goes on. And then it also covers the academic and research part of our industry, which includes drug research, laboratories, clinical trials, and obviously manufacturers themselves. And then it covers the services part of our business.
And administration's department.
Yeah, it includes like the folks that are involved in coding, billing, insurance, even hospice care. It's a massive, massive industry. To try to attempt to make that entire industry nonprofit is fairly mind-boggling because everyone would say no. So that's why I think single payer is such a difficult proposition for Democrats. That's why Obamacare didn't attempt to become single payer. All it did was take a current government program like Medicaid and simply expanded it.
In other words, instead of talking about smaller government, you make it even bigger.
Well, we have essentially three single-payer systems already existing in America. Medicaid is a single-payer system. Medicare is a single-payer system. And the Veterans Administration, the VA, is a single-payer system. Now, within those systems, all three of them are losing money. So, and the government covers that. So the difficulty is that if you propose to turn the entire health industry into single payer, who's going to pay the cost of that? Because even with current single payer systems, they attempt to try to control costs, but the need is greater than the amount of revenue that gets generated. And that's a basic problem. So, and the other problem we have is simple demographics. The baby boom generation in America right now is entering their 60s and 70s.
Okay.
They are the largest segment of our population that requires the highest healthcare cost, and they're not making money anymore.
Okay.
So that is a problem.
And thank you very much. It's been I thank you even more for that because that blocked me the last wheel back up. Right? So I wouldn't back up. That way. I started to understand it is not only a money issue, it's the structure of the production, the whole production, massive production, how it is all structured, right? Okay, now, put it this way, with the existing Obamacare temporarily still functioning here at this moment, and when the Assembly Republicans are trying to put up something they have not yet, how would you expect anything to happen in the near future, mid-range future, or even long term? Well, we quite worry about that.
In the near future, I don't think anything is going to change. I don't think the Republicans are going to be able to bring an Obamacare bill out of the Senate, Obamacare repeal or replace bill out of the Senate. That means the House action will languish and President Trump will not have a bill to sign. I think what's going to happen is that both sides, Democrats and Republicans, are going to figure out that they can't compromise right now on their respective constituencies. And we will get to next year, 2018, for the midterm elections, and both parties will go back to the voters in the midterm elections on their respective platforms. The Democrats will be calling for single payer and calling for an expansion of Obamacare. Republicans will be calling for a larger majority to push through their changes in Obamacare. Obamacare will continue the way it is. Some states will continue to lose insurers. Healthcare costs will rise, premiums will rise, and that middle class will get squeezed again.
In other words, the next 14 or 15 months, we won't see nothing.
I highly doubt it. I don't think there's any political willpower in Washington for either side to build a consensus. And part of the problem is that healthcare is so political because there's so much money involved, and everyone has staked out their sides. And I think the voters are going to have to decide. The voters, decided somewhat when they elected President Trump and they gave the Senate and the House to Republicans that they did want reforms in Obamacare, if not outright repeal and replace. Now the question is, in 2018, will that election be about Obamacare, or will it be about the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency? That is a question I don't know how it's going to be answered yet. But that will go a long way to determining whether or not next year we're going to see any kind of Obamacare reform.
It looks that Obamacare is only one thing, one issue that we stuck here. I remember last time we were talking about how we want to score Donald Trump for his 60-something or 70 days into the office. So now we're talking about 2 months, 3 months already, another 3 months. Oh no, now that's half a year already. So how do you score his performance so far?
Well, I think by any objective standard, the president's time in office so far, or his first 7 months, have been extremely difficult. Not just because of things like the lingering investigation about Russia that's expanded, the firing of James Comey, the special prosecutor investigation by Robert Mueller. But just on a very practical standpoint, there seems to be a lot of chaos within the White House, the inability to get a consistent message out. Sean Spicer resigning as White House press secretary, and Anthony Scaramucci being brought in as the White House communications director, and the failure of the Obama administration to get their appointments done. For example, the Commodities Trading Board, which is a rather arcane board made up of 5 members, but has such an important a role to play in our economy because it handles derivatives on the stock market, lost one of its 2 remaining members. So there's only 1 member on a 5-member board that handles literally trillions of dollars in the American economy, and the president hasn't filled those spots. He hasn't even actually named nominees yet to fill those spots. So we have some glaring problems that the president could fix if he were to up his game, so to speak.
If the conclusion is that in the near future, we aren't supposed to see anything, we are not supposed to see anything, what will be the time span when we start to see something, or something will actually show up?
I think if we do not get an Obamacare reform bill out this year, we're not going to see one until after 2018, because you'll have to have the midterm election, and then depending on whether or not the Democrats make inroads with the Republicans, or the Republicans are able to expand their majority, that will determine the shape of what Obamacare reform is going to look like.
No, what will happen in that case for 2018 midterm election?
Yeah, November.
No, I know, but what will they do? They want to go public vote again for this?
Well, yeah, I mean, essentially,
But for public vote, they don't have a plan there. They don't even have a plan there.
Well, yeah, but the Republicans and Democrats will both go back on the campaign stump in 2018, and they will make the argument. The Republicans will argue that they need larger majorities to get a repeal and replace bill out, and the Democrats will go out on the campaign stump claiming that we need single payer and to preserve Obamacare in order to keep your health care. Those 2 competing messages will have to be decided by the American people in the midterm election, and if Republicans increase their numbers, then they will have the mandate to repeal and replace Obamacare.
Okay, one last question in this area, though. I was talking to my friend Ken Hemming the other day, talking about problems among GOP. And instead of 2 schools, they're talking about, he said, well, probably 3. You're talking about more opinions than 2. So what's wrong with the domestic size of GOP?
Well, I think the basic problem with the Republican Party right now is that the Republican Party is not united behind a single vision. Now, traditionally, if the president is a Republican, then that president provides the vision for the party. But in President Trump's case, I think he has been unable to coalesce around a vision that Republicans can rally around and move forward on. Because the difficulty is that he had a lot of very simple campaign slogans: repeal and replace Obamacare, build the wall, blow up ISIS and stuff like that.
Or Hillary email.
The difficulty is that he's had a very, very hard time translating those into actionable policy. And he's demonstrated a certain inability to work collaboratively with Congress to lead them to where he wants them to go. Now, I don't know if that's his failure of leadership or Congress's unwillingness to go where he wants to go. But the end result is still the same, is that there's a lot of disarray in the Republican Party. Now, that's not to say the Democrats aren't suffering the same vision problem, because they are. Because Hillary Clinton certainly was not an enabling force to rally the Democratic Party. There's still a sizable split between the Hillary part of the party and the Bernie Sanders part of the party. So and that's evidence in healthcare, where there's a lot of Democrats advocating.
That's
for
exactly the
single-payer.
tragedy, because the last election, I felt, the way I felt, lots of people, lots of folks felt the same way I did, that we had no choices.
Well, I think the general consensus among most Americans is that no one liked their choices.
No one liked their choices. And even somebody voted him, and they say, well, I had no other choices.
Yeah.
Right? Like in my case, I gave up a whole thing. The presidential page I just flipped over, left open.
Well, you should have still voted for somebody.
I voted for something else. Anyway, with me today is my good friend, Mr. Honorable James Lee. Honorable James Lee comes from the Presidential Advisor Board of both presidencies for George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, 41 and 43. Coming back to L.A., to L.A., he acted as the spokesman for Governor Pete Wilson for some time, and now he's running his own firm, political consultation firm, Lee Strategy. Big, you can search, you can Google online and find out how big my guest is, so that we take a brief moment. When we come back, we drag over our last issue that I prepared for him, that is tax cut, all right? So stay with us, please. Hello, dear folks, my lovely audience, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show, Jack Chow on the East West Show with G&E TV, talking about the mostly worried issue is that is our health care, Obamacare being overturned by Trumpcare, which has nothing there yet, which are being decided. We do not know yet. And with my friend, Mr. Honorable James Lee, coming from the Presidential Advisory Board for both previous presidency for George W. Bush and H.W. Bush, 41 and 43, and former spokesman for California Governor Pete Wilson. Here, I want him to speak on his own behalf, right? Talking about our next issue, the tax cut. I know that everybody knows that that was one of the very biggest slogans about tax cut during his entire campaign. And now half year had passed already. We haven't seen anything yet. So is there anything being cooking, or the issue being forgotten, or whatever?
Well, Senator McConnell has stated that, if they are unable to get Obamacare done in this current session, they're going to move on to tax reform. So that's very clearly the next big policy debate that's going to come up in Washington. I think there's a general consensus among both Democrats and Republicans that there needs to be a tax reform package. Again, it's just a question of what. But I think the broad outlines are pretty clear that both Democrats and Republicans do have some areas of agreement on tax reform. I think generally both parties agree that repatriation of overseas profits is an issue. They need to bring American corporate dollars from overseas back to the United States. So having some type of tax amnesty to bring that money back is a proposal that both sides agree on. I think generally everybody agrees that the tax system in America right now is too complicated. It takes too much time for an average American to do his taxes. I think also that there's a general agreement that the tax code needs to be reformed to help America's industry be more competitive. The United States right now has the highest corporate tax rate in the world, which makes it a target for luring businesses offshore. Whether or not those businesses are manufacturing or service, it's a problem. We see offshoring in terms of everything from data centers to computer coding to manufacturing. I mean, the apparel industry in America is non-existent right now. So I think that there is a desire on the parts of both parties to try to get tax reform done. Considering how very little agreement there has been in Washington, I think this is the one area where both leadership of the Democrats and Republicans in the House and Senate believe that they have to kind of get something done to show the American people going into next year's midterm that they can actually accomplish something.
Okay. So In other words, there are efforts being lined up. If they fail with this Obamacare push, they will start on the tax cut thing.
Yeah, very clearly, this is the next big policy.
This is the next
discussion.
big policy, right? I mean, to compare these two with the current tax brackets of under Obama, with the new plan, and by the way, this time with the tax, they do have a plan to cut because we see them the average. I mean the percentage already. Talking about 35 or something.
Well, we've seen some proposals from the White House. We've seen some sporadic proposals from different senators and congressmen on both the House Republican side. We have not actually seen a bill yet, so that has not been done. So we don't know yet, what a comprehensive tax reform package is going to look like because it hasn't been offered yet. So until a bill gets offered, then really we just have a lot of speculation about what the general broad outlines might be. The Democrats believe that we should maintain tax rates on the wealthy and give more tax breaks for lower and middle income Americans. Republicans differ in that approach. So I think that that's going to be kind of the traditional point of debate. But I think that in terms of how the tax code is administered, how people file their tax returns, and how taxes affect American businesses, I think there's a general agreement to try to get something done in that area.
Yeah, by logic, I believe it is a matter understood across the line, right? Because there's nothing more obstacles to hold them understanding how important the issue is. Nobody wants to be taxed.
Well, I mean, that's true. I don't think we're going to abolish the tax code, but I think that, I think generally speaking, Americans intuitively understand the tax code is
and
way
on
too
the other
complicated.
side, that is only the inevitable, right? So one thing is that you want more tax. The Democrats say that we're taxed enough, and we still want a tax, right? And the Republican says no, let's not do it. Or whoever says what. So are we taxed at already over the rim already? Recently with the California gas tax, we're paying another 63 more per gallon.
Well, I mean,
so
if you get away from business and personal income taxes on the federal level and you start getting into state taxes, that's a totally different conversation. Because the California
concept.
I mean, I think generally speaking, you find that like states like California, New York, and Massachusetts, for example, are incredibly high tax states. California has the highest state income tax rate.
Yeah, that's why we're leading.
Yeah, and with this gas tax increase that's coming in November, California will have one of the top 3 gas taxes in the United States.
Yes.
So obviously, it's going to cause a significant issue. Tax reform is a legitimate debate that's happening across America. I mean, in Oregon, for example, there's a debate right now about implementing a personal income tax, because there is none right now, instead of using a sales tax to fund state services. The marijuana debate in terms of taxes is one that's starting to heat up around the country because more states are legalizing marijuana, and there's a lot of money to be made in marijuana and how that should be taxed. So all of these debates are going to feed into a broader national debate about taxes and tax reform, but I think the general consensus right now is the focus ought to be in trying to make taxes easier for Americans to understand and file and to follow. As to whether or not that will happen, I have no idea.
Yeah. And last time, at the time of file my tax return, I looked at the paper. The paper is even more confusing, which I never had the mind of sitting there to read one by one. By the time I finished the last sentence, I forgot what the sentence is, the whole thing like that, right? So now, paying tax is something we're obligated. I have no problem with. Go ahead, right? But tax money, how are we supposed to make sure that tax money is spent properly? Like with the health care, that's exactly where the money comes from. So the two are heavily related. How do you see these two matters are related together and reflective each other. Please.
Well, I mean, there's been a historical problem in trying to ensure that taxes collected for a specific purpose are used for that specific purpose. I'll give you an example. In California, historically, you know, taxes that are collected for gas taxes, which are supposed to be used for transportation and road repair, have been used for other things other than roads, which is why under the proposal right now to raise the gas tax, there is another proposal that's due to be voted on this fall that would guarantee that funds collected under that gas tax will be used only for transportation. But you know, you have to understand historically there have been ideas like this done before, and it's never really worked. I mean, for example, in the United States, Social Security trust funds are supposed to be set aside only for Social Security. But historically, Democrats and Republicans have raided those Social Security trust funds, stuck an IOU there to use that money to pay for other things. So, you know, we have historically done a pretty bad job at using money intended for one purpose, but used it for another purpose. And it's been a legitimate concern how to ensure that, you know, government doesn't do that again.
One thing average Americans want to know, even with the Trump tax policies, are folks making less than $125,000 per year, though, they are not very much influenced, right?
Well, I mean, the difficulty in taxes is that, you know, there's a big focus on taxing people's income, okay, their paycheck, and the difficulty is that, you know, for people in a more wealthy category, their compensation isn't just in the form of a paycheck. Their compensation is the form of stock and equity, for example. Like in the technology industry, the vast majority of employees in tech get their compensation in the form of stock options. And that catapults them into a much different income category. But, you know, we treat capital gains as a different tax structure than we treat income. So there's a lot of debate as to whether or not the tax code should be addressing that equity portion rather than just the paycheck portion. You know, for example, you know, if you look at most CEOs in America, they really don't get paid a lot of money in terms of a paycheck. They get paid all their money in terms of stock.
With a bonus with stock, whatever stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, well, it looks I feel sad. I'm not making that much. I feel good. I feel better because I don't have to be taxed like crazy, right? Today, with my good friend, Honorable James Lee, we are trying so hard to get answers for you for some of your confusions. I believe quite a few friends including who did write to me, who haven't not a time write to me yet, I believe that you get the answer. And I would say if today, we understand today they are voting, right? So
the Republicans in the Senate are voting.
What's your expectation about today's result?
I don't think that they will be able to get a majority for the proposal. I think they will fall short, and then the current effort to try to reform Obamacare this year will fail, and then we'll be stuck with what we have, and we'll have to wait till next year.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, and thank you for making it rapid in a way that looks so optimistic. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.